Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all here. Thanks for coming to this event. It's important as we look forward for the future of 911 that we recognize that what got us here won't necessarily get us there, that there is so much that is changing in the world of telecommunications, of telephony, of how 911 is offered, as we go from 911 to E911 to next-gen 911, that it's critically important that we understand the interdependencies. In this particular case, we're here to talk about how do we have that effective annual communication of your assessment of the ability to ensure backup power for support to 911, circuit diversity, and to ensure that entire change management process reflects the end goal, which is reliable 911. So I don't want to take any of the specifics away from the FCC panel that we've assembled today. John Healy and Eric will certainly get into the details as we see what a successful certification would look like. But Jeff Goldthorpe will kick us off and make sure that we're oriented around the outcome, what we hope to achieve today with a successful conference. So, Jeff, over to you, and welcome. Thanks.
Why did the lights go out when I... Anyway, let me add my thanks to all of you for coming out. I wanted to start by asking you to think back to 2004, 2005 when we introduced NORS. A lot of you have some familiarity with NORS. What we've tried to do over the years, John Healy's been here the whole time, what we've tried to do over the years is to conduct the development and revisions to that system using a collaborative process. Any change that we make to the system is socialized in advance so that folks know what's coming out. They get some experience with trying it out and using it. David Ahn is sitting in the back. He's the person who actually writes the code for the system. So some of you may have run into David over the years as well. So that's been going on for a while. And we think it's worked pretty well, not perfectly, but pretty well. And we'd like to carry that process of sort of collaborative development into the future as we roll out these rules on 911 certification that came out in December. Those rules will include a new system, some new procedures, obviously, and we wanted to start the dialogue today to introduce you to that system and to the processes that would come with that system and get your input on those processes and on that system, so that as we go about the job of developing the system, we know what you're thinking. This won't be the last time that we have a chance to talk. We have a series of webcasts scheduled for this summer, and they're focused primarily on smaller carriers, but they're not exclusion. There's no exclusions. I mean, anybody can be part of the webinar. It's just a matter of what the focus is. So we're trying to reach out as broadly as we can before we get the very first certification in the door. Now, let's just talk about today and what we're hoping to achieve today, and maybe some ground rules before we start. First of all, we want to make it clear that this isn't the place where we want to relitigate any of the issues that we dealt with as part of the rulemaking process that went on over the last year or more. That's done, at least to a point, okay? Of course, there are other ways to bring things up to our attention, but we prefer that this not be the place to do that. This is a place to focus on implementation, assume that the rules as they exist right now are the rules as they will be, and how do we go about getting information in the door here that complies with the rules and do that in a way that imposes the least burden on the communications providers that have to provide us with that information. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we ask that you not, we'd rather not get into specific issues that are specific to a particular entity. So if you've got a question like, do these rules apply to me or my company? That's a question that's going to come with a lot of case-specific details. We're happy to have that discussion with you. It's probably a discussion that's better to have over the phone or in a meeting, or just give us a call. You can reach any of us. We're easy to find, okay? And we're happy to have that discussion with you. It's probably more appropriate not to have it in such a broad forum as we are in right now. So we're focused on implementation and how to make the implementation as effective, efficient, and user-friendly as possible. One last thing I'll mention, as you probably know, there is a petition that's been filed here asking us to take a look at some of the rules, particularly those having to do with NG 911. And that is still an open issue. So we're not going to be able to get into those kinds, or we just won't be getting into those issues having a bearing on NG 911 today and how the rules that were passed in December apply to NG 911. That's being dealt with in parallel with this process. So I wanted to set those three things out from the outset, and that I think we can get a lot done today just to share with you what we know about the process and how it's unfolding. You could share with us how you'd like to see the process look, given that the rules are what they are, and what would be easiest for you in terms of how you could make this information available to us. I think I have nothing more to add right now, so thank you again for coming, and I'm going to turn it over to Eric to start us off on the substance of the matter. Okay, Eric?
All right, well, thank you, Jeff, and welcome, everybody. We're glad to have you here this afternoon and appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Also want to say hello to everyone who might be joining us online. Want to note that if anyone is following this remotely, you can access this slide deck as well as the one that John will present at, okay, this is going to be long, so www.fcc.gov/events/911-certification-process. Crystal clear, I hope. fcc.gov/events/911-reliability-certification-process. Also, for anyone who's joining us remotely, we have an email account set up to take questions. That address is livequestions, all one word, at fcc.gov. livequestions@fcc.gov. All right, so with that, I'm going to give just a short overview of the report and order that the Commission adopted in December, which gives us what we do know about this process, and that's what was set forth in the rules on 911 reliability. My purpose in doing this is just to give us context to the conversation following about how the certification will work. Should add my disclaimer here that the rules that are binding, the rules themselves, are in the report and order and the CFR. What I'm doing here today is just intended as a short overview. If you have any doubts about what the rules actually say or how they might apply to you, would encourage you to look at the order or the rules themselves. Okay, so what is the 911 Reliability Report and Order? Well, as you may recall, the June 2012 derecho storm led the Commission to take an inquiry in 911 reliability. The order in December of 2013 was the culmination of that process. It adopted two basic requirements. It's that covered 911 service provider, and that term is defined, and we can talk about what that covers must take reasonable measures to provide reliable service. And the way that this is evidenced is by an annual certification of compliance with specific best practices, or there's an option of taking reasonable alternative measures. That covers three areas. There's the critical 911 circuit diversity. This is the circuit auditing requirement. There's also a backup power requirement for central offices that directly serve a PSAP. And then there's a network monitoring requirement designed to ensure that the telemetry into a network continues during an emergency. The way the certification works is that the provider can either certify to the best practice, or it can state that it takes an alternative measure, or that element is not applicable. In those cases, though, it must provide a brief explanation. The order delegated authority to the Public Safety Bureau to administer the certification process and develop and revise the forms as necessary. And that's what brings us here today. We're here to develop the form and certification process that will allow these rules to work. Who do the rules apply to? The order identifies basically two categories of covered 911 service providers. The first, and probably the most likely, is a provider that provides 911, E911, or next generation 911 capabilities. This is the call routing, location information, and that kind of thing directly to a PSAP. This does not include the PSAPs themselves or a governmental authority that might provide its own 911 service. And it also does not include the origination of 911 calls. So we're not talking about the picking up the phone and calling 911. This is the service into the PSAP. The second type of covered 911 service provider would be a company that operates a central office that directly serves a PSAP. So cases like this would be an office that hosts a selective router, location database, or the last facility through which a 911 trunk or a 10-digit administrative line passes before connecting to the PSAP. So this is getting into a little more detail about the certification. As I said, the first element is circuit diversity. Now these here are the elements of the certification. Remember that there can be alternative measures or non-applicability depending on individual circumstances. The circuit diversity section requires a certification that the provider has conducted diversity audits of critical 911 circuits or equivalent data paths. That is defined basically as facilities between a selective router or location database and the central office or the endpoint serving the PSAP. It also requires a certification of tagging. You may call it different things, but that's just our term for having some sort of inventory management process, a way of keeping track of the results of the audit and keeping records of where the 911 circuits are routed so they aren't compromised by mistake. The last requirement is elimination of single points of failure in the critical 911 circuits to each PSAP. Now, if that's not possible to eliminate single points of failure, can provide an explanation of alternative measures or some kind of ongoing remedial process. So such as, we're working on it, it'll take until this date to finish remediation. Similarly, this may not be applicable if a provider doesn't provision what we're calling critical 911 circuits. So one case that's come up would be if a provider only provides 10-digit administrative lines. Those would not be considered critical 911 circuits, and they would not be subject to the audit. Moving on to backup power. So this is important to point out with respect to any central office that directly serves a PSAP. So these are only specific central offices that are particularly involved in 911 service. For those central offices, the rules require a certification of backup power for 24 hours if the central office directly serves a PSAP, or if it hosts a selective router for 72 hours. There's a requirement of testing and maintaining backup power equipment in these central offices to the manufacturer's specifications. Another point of the generators could be designed for fully automatic operation and for ease of manual operation when required. Fourth point is this idea of tandem or interdependent generators. The certification requires that any central office where there's more than one backup generator, that they're designed as standalone independent units, that they don't depend on one another operating for proper function. Now, to all of these requirements, the provider could certify an alternative measure or non-applicability depending on its circumstances. The last element of the certification is diverse network monitoring. Now, these, as distinguished from the 911 circuits, this is not the network that carries the calls. This is the monitoring or the telemetry network that allows the provider to monitor the status of its facilities. So the certification requires a diversity audit of not every link in that chain, but of the aggregation points in each 911 service area. So if the monitoring is done through a system that has choke points or aggregation for monitoring, what we're looking for is a diversity audit of those points, as well as the monitoring links between those points and the network operations center that's used to monitor. Second element of the certification is implementing physically diverse aggregation points and physically diverse monitoring links. Again, there can be alternative measures or ongoing remediation, and this may also be not applicable to some 911 service providers. Reason for that, and this is worth looking at in the rules, is that the 911 service area for monitoring is defined as the area where a 911 service provider operates a selective router. So if a company doesn't operate a selective router, this network monitoring section may not be applicable. A little bit about how the certification information is handled. The order sets forth these three categories of information that are presumed confidential. There's the understanding that some of the information provided with the certification is going to be either competitive or a public safety concern. So we will presume confidential descriptions and documentation of alternative measures, information detailing exactly what's been done to correct a problem in the network. And then if the Commissioner Bureau requests supplemental information, we expect that would be at a level of detail that would also be presumed confidential. The form itself, and this is what we're here to figure out what the form consists of, but the responses on the form itself and these aggregated general responses will not be treated as confidential, and I think John's going to get into a little bit of that. Who needs to certify? The order adopts a definition of a person called a certifying official. This is defined as a corporate officer with supervisory and budgetary authority over network operations in all relevant service areas. The name and title may vary by company, but we're looking for a corporate officer at the supervisory and budgeting level. The order encourages service providers to share the results of circuit audits and circuit diversity information with PSAPs on reasonable terms that protect confidentiality. I know we have some people from the PSAP community here today, and I know that they appreciate having as much information as they possibly can about their 911 service and the routing. So we would just encourage you to look at that section of the order, and please make as much information available to your PSAPs as you possibly can. Just a quick roundup of what's going on with the rules right now. The rules that did not require Office of Management and Budget approval. So this is like the what we're calling the reasonable measures rule that covered 911 service providers take reasonable measures in these areas to provide reliable service. That went into effect in February, so those rules are on the books. You can look in 47 CFR section 12.4. Now, the certifications themselves are an information collection, which requires us to get approval from OMB. That process is underway, and based on what we know now, we're anticipating approval sometime around September of this year. Assuming that happens, then the certification is phased in through an initial certification. That's of 50% compliance with each of these elements that we've just gone through. Based on what we know now, we expect that to be due sometime in the middle of 2015. So you'll have the better part of a year at least to get that process in order. Then after the initial phase-in, there'll be a full annual certification due every year afterward. As Jeff mentioned, we have a petition for reconsideration pending in this docket. It has to do primarily with the next generation 911 networks, although we also have some questions there about leased or shared facilities with third parties. As Jeff mentioned, we need those comments to be filed on the record, so we have a pending proceeding and can't really get into details of that today. But if anyone has thoughts on that, we would appreciate hearing from you, so please be in touch. And with that, unless anyone has questions, I'm happy to turn it over to John for the main event. He's going to talk about how we can put these rules into place through a certification system that works for everybody. So thank you, and I appreciate everyone being here.
Now, I hope you're clapping because I stepped up. I'm waiting for hopefully the slides will come up soon. Well, again, I'd like to welcome you to our workshop on 911 reliability certification. Thank you. As several people have said, this workshop, the discussion will be only on the process. So we're only going to be covering a potential system for providing the certifications. We're not going to be revisiting the rules or for the basis for the certifications. If you have any questions, you're welcome to answer or ask your questions at any time during my presentation. So feel free to interrupt me at any time. This particular presentation, we're going to be talking about the ways to collect information, and hopefully you're going to have a lot of inputs on the type of information that we should, on the process itself and on the proposed templates. There's 3 properties of the certification process that I would like to stress. We would like the process to be easy. In other words, we want to make it so that it's user-friendly. We also want to make sure that the information is very secure. So easy, secure. Finally, we want to make sure that the information we get is complete. In other words, we get the appropriate information and we can easily analyze it, sort it, and use it. There's a number of questions that we're going to be going through today. Hopefully, I'll answer most of these questions during my presentation. First of all, we want to know what kind of technologies and processes should be used to collect the certification information. Should we have an online system? Should we accept things in an Excel spreadsheet? Should we have you send us emails about this stuff? So what should be the most appropriate process? What would be the easiest for you and the easiest for us to sort the information and keep the information together? The one question that's always comes up is what information is going to be confidential? And the summary information is generally going to be confidential, but the other information, the information about the alternative measures, what you're doing in lieu of having complete diversity in many cases, that type of information will be treated confidentially. The next two bullets actually have to do with alternative measures. We would like to have common alternative measures. In other words, we don't want to have 700 different alternative measures. The ones that come up all the time, we would like to have hard-coded in the system so that you can select those particular alternative measures. The fifth bullet talks about small entities. We realize that our rules don't apply exactly the same way to large entities and to small entities. Usually for many of the small entities, they don't control or they don't operate selective routers. So several of the provisions in the rules are not applicable to some of these smaller entities. The next question is what type of users should we have on the system? For the people who are familiar with the with NORS, the Network Outage Reporting System, you think I'd know what it stands for? The network with NORS, we have several different levels of users, and that was for security reasons. And so the question is what type of users should we have on the system if we develop a system? Another question is what should be the rollout of the system? Should it be available several months before certifications are due? How should we test the system? The third last bullet asks about the security of the information. And as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, the security of the information is incredibly important. With NORS, it would be the end of outage reporting if we divulged a lot of the information in network outage reports. The same is going to be the case for the information that's provided on alternative measures and a lot of the explanations that are provided in the certification process. So again, we want to make sure that the information is secure. And finally, the last bullet talks about attestation. How should we allow people to provide attestations for the certification process? Okay, let's talk about some ways to input information. The first bullet here talks about companies with a small number of reports. For those kind of companies, we honestly believe that probably the best kind of thing to have is to have an online system so they could directly input the information. But there are several companies who are going to be providing quite a few reports, and generally these reports are going to be for the cases where they have some alternative measure. In these particular cases, putting in one report at a time is probably not a very efficient way of getting the information. And so we're thinking of providing an Excel spreadsheet or something that companies could fill in, and then we would, here at the FCC, would put the information into the system. We do want to have all the information in a system so that we can analyze it, we can use it, and make use of that information. Any of you who are familiar with NORS, when you log on to NORS, you get a security screen. And this is my way of, again, emphasizing that it's really important that we keep the information secure. One thing we do with the network outage reporting system is we use a secure socket layer, and everybody uses that. I do know that there's all the security bugs with SSL, but not in our systems. Okay. We also want to have limited access to the system. This system is not going to be available to the public. It's only going to be available to the companies providing us information. We are going to be summarizing some of the information and putting that information on the web in a different spot. But the system itself is to collect the information and for us to analyze it and go through it. Okay, what types of users? As you know, I mentioned the network outage reporting system just a few minutes ago. The network outage reporting system has 2 levels of users for people inputting information. We have what we call outage inputters and outage coordinators. Now you may ask, why do we do something like that? The higher level users have access to all the information that a company provides. And we want to make sure that somebody from another company doesn't have access to your information. So we screen all the high-level users. In fact, the only way you can become a high-level user is if David On or Julia too or I upgrade you. There's absolutely no way you can. That way we prevent people from having access to information from your particular company. I don't know if this is the right way for this particular system. The reason why it's very valuable for NORS is because there's a lot of people putting in information in NORS from many different companies. For this system, the companies may decide they want to just have 1 or 2 people put in information. So if that's the case, if only one person is putting in information in a company, we won't need 2 levels of users. So it's a question that I would like to ask the audience is, do you think we're going to need to have several different levels of users for this particular system? Okay. This is a proposed template for the login screen. If you notice, it looks just like the template for NORS. All I did was cut and paste a few things on top of the template for NORS. Generally, for any system, you have to have a user ID and a password. We may end up using your email address as your username, but we haven't decided that yet. The main template for at least this is our vision of the main menu. And what you see here is the first 4 bullets describe the major reports that we're going to be asking you to provide. One is the overall certification report. That's kind of like, and there's only going to be 1 per company. So 1 overall certification report per company. The second bullet talks about the diversity audit report. Again, this is only when you have an alternate measure. You're not going to have to fill in a diversity audit report if you don't have, or if you haven't implemented an alternative measure for diversity audits. The third bullet is the backup power. And as Eric said, we have 3 major categories of certification. One's the diversity audit, one's the backup power, and one's the monitoring. And these, if you're submitting or updating a diversity audit, a backup power, or a monitoring report, it's again for an alternative measure. You won't have to fill in this kind of report for every PSAP, only the ones in which you have implemented a alternate measure. So let's go to the proposed template for the overall certification. For overall certification, there's going to be, yes?
Going back a little bit, I'm Valerie Weimer from JSI, and we do a lot of these inputs.
Oh, wait a minute. You're going to have to get your mic.
Hi, Valerie Weimer from JSI, and we do inputs on a lot of FCC reporting for a number of the rural carriers. And back on your other one where you said the login is just the email and the name of a person.
Yeah.
We end up today doing most of ours by FRN number because we'll actually have the same person at JSI doing 30, 40, 50 companies. And so you're going to need something that says what company you're putting it in for to start with.
Okay, yes. Basically, one thing that we always do is when you get your login ID, you have to put in the company that you're representing, and then you'll only be able to look at the reports for that particular company. Login IDs are assigned to a specific company. Okay. Yeah. By the way, again, if there's better ways to do what we currently do with NORS, or you have ideas on how we should do it that you believe would be easier for you, please let me know. Right now, we're very flexible. In about 5 months, we won't be very flexible. But actually, that's one of the reasons why we're having this workshop. This is the time when if you have ideas, suggestions, please let us know. Again, this is the proposed template for the diversity portion, the circuit diversity portion. What you can see is A, B, and C. Those are the elements that Eric had showed you before. One is to conduct the audits, one is to tag the circuits, and the third one is to eliminate single points of failure. There's going to be generally 4 choices. Either you do it. If you've done it for every one of the PSAPs for which you have for which you're responsible for the critical 911 circuits, you would check yes, and then you wouldn't have to file any alternative measures reports. Now, if you hit the second button where it says no but alternative measures to ensure 911 reliability, you can read that. The idea here is that if you hit that box, you will have to file a critical 911 circuit diversity alternative measures report for each of the PSAPs for which you have an alternative measure. Then there's no, and it asks you to explain, and then not applicable, please explain. For a lot of the smaller entities, on the not applicable will be what they choose because they actually don't have any critical 911 circuits. Okay, this is the proposed template. Again, this is for the first certification report for central office backup power. Notice there's A, B, C, and D. Those are the elements that Eric talked about. The first A talks about provisioning backup power. B talks about testing to manufacture specs. C talks about automatic operation of generators, and D is the tandem generator one. Again, if you've implemented all these particular backup powers, in other words, you satisfy A, B, C, and D, you can check yes, and that's the last report you're going to have to file for central office backup power. If you hit the no, but alternative measures have been used, you're going to have to file a alternative measures report for each of the central offices for which you have alternative measures. And then there's no and not applicable also. Finally, we have the network monitoring. And again, there's three items here. Basically, the idea is we're looking that you have more than one monitoring point in your networks. We don't really want to have an aggregation point that If it goes down, you have no visibility into your network. So if you satisfy A, B, and C, again, you can hit yes. Then there's the no, but alternative measures. So it's very similar to the other ones. So let's talk about the alternative measures reports. This is the alternative measures reports for circuit auditing. So in this particular case, you have to put down what the PSAP name, because we're talking about the 911 circuits into that particular PSAP. We asked for the state, the county name, whether you conducted a diversity audit. If you didn't, the reason why you didn't conduct a diversity audit. It talks about tagging, the reason why you didn't tag it, the reasons for not fully diversifying. Let me move on to the important one, though. The middle box talks about alternative measures. What we're hoping to do, again, for when you're filling out an alternative measures report, is we'd like to have a standard set that covers most of the cases. Here, I've listed some of the ones that came to my mind. I'm not sure these are the most appropriate ones, and I would love to have some advice on what should be the most appropriate alternative measures. Here I've listed you made the circuits logically diverse. Maybe there was a reason why you couldn't make them physically diverse, but you could make them logically diverse. You use extra circuit packs at each end. So instead of having all the circuits come into one circuit pack, they came into different circuit packs. You routed through a different floor of the building. Originally, everything went into the first floor of the building. Now some of it goes into the first floor, some of it goes into the second floor. Many times that's the difference in not having a failure. So there's a number of alternative measures listed. Again, I'm praying, please, you can email me them. I don't care. Send me your suggestions on what are the alternative measures that you think that we need for the certification process. Okay.
There we go. Joe Marks, AT&T. In terms of the alternative measures by PSAP,
yeah.
Does it actually get down to the circuit level? Because you may end up having, tens of circuits or more to a PSAP, and you may not have the same alternative measure for each one. What is the intent in terms of what you want to capture?
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is get at least, if you did 3 or 4 things, in fact, that's what this next one is, I'd like you to choose, all 4 of the things that you did to make it more diverse. Sometimes you can't make it completely diverse because there's an element, there's just no physical way of doing it, or it would be prohibitively expensive. We certainly don't expect that. But there are many times there are things you can do that really improve the diversity, don't cost you much, and you may do 3 or 4 of them.
Okay, so like one of the classic examples you've given is, there's a point where you're crossing a river and there's a single bridge, which would be a single point of failure. And, short of building a separate bridge or digging a tunnel, it's not going to be physically diverse. Would that be one of the options you would collect? And you'd collect just however many options there were for why you didn't, or what alternative measures you've taken?
Well, in that particular case, you could say that you diversified all the elements. You did a lot of. Maybe one of the alternative measures is that we logical should have is diversity everywhere except for a river crossing or something like that. Maybe that's a good alternative measure that we ought to include.
Okay, thanks.
The idea is we want to capture those. We want to make sure that we know that you did a lot of really good things to diversify the network. Okay, this is a question that says, do we need an option for users to select more than one alternative measure? And I sort of rhetorically answered that question. I think the answer is yes. That's going to impact how we design the system. So, this is some of the alternatives for backup power. Again, you would only fill in this report if you have an alternative measure for backup power. So the backup power requirement is essentially based on the switch. So we would ask you to put in the SILI code, what state the switch is in, whether this central office contains a selective router or not. The reason why that's important is that we have a different backup power requirement for offices that have selective routers. If it's a selective router, the requirement is 72 hours of backup power, and if it's a non-selective router, it's 24 hours. And I do apologize for the typos in this particular view graph. Here are some of the alternatives, that at least that I've come up with for the amount of backup power. There are a number of cases where you can't have the required number of amount of backup power. If you have a portable generator available within 4 hours, I mean, that's an alternative measure that you might implement. There may be zoning regulations that restrict the amount of fuel, but you have procedures to make sure that you can get the fuel to the place, to the central office. Zoning regulations may not allow a permanent generator. There are buildings where they will not allow it. But obviously for those buildings, you want to make sure that you have a portable generator that you can bring in. Again, I'm not sure that these are the best alternative measures, but if you have suggestions, please send them to me. Okay. Here has some of the alternates for testing. That's the first thing. Testing according to manufacturer specs. We've heard in a number of cases that the specs are actually out of date, so you follow actually better procedures than the outdated manufacturer specs. You actually test more frequently but less time, so that the overall amount of testing is approximately equivalent. You've modified the testing because there's noise restrictions in the area. We do know that there's lots of places where there's ordinances against noise, and when you do run these tests, a lot of times they make a lot of noise, unfortunately. The third line there talks about the generator being started automatically or easily started. I don't actually have too many alternative measures in this particular case, but one could be that you have documented procedures and trained technicians on the procedures, even if the procedures are reasonably complicated. Okay. The fourth item about for backup power is actually has to do with the alternate for tandem generator. We've heard of a number of things that people have when you have tandem generators. By the way, the idea here for this particular backup power requirement is what we didn't want to have happen is that if you have two generators and one of them fails, the other one isn't able to power the central office or power the building, so that essentially each generator becomes a single point of failure. There are several ways of remedying this. Some companies have load shedding arrangements. There's also, we've heard of a case where a company actually put in another generator so that only 2 out of the 3 had to be functioning for the office to work. So it's a different reliability arrangement. Okay. This is the proposed template for the alternative measures for monitoring a report. Again, I don't have too many alternative measures listed. Some companies, as far as I know, they actually have a completely separate procedure for monitoring equipment. They have almost like a separate network for monitoring equipment. Obviously, that's a diverse way of doing it. Other companies have IP monitoring at every point in their network. In this particular case, they really don't have aggregation points. What they have is they can monitor each point separately. That's obviously diverse aggregation points. So again, the idea here is to provide alternative measures that that we believe are going to be selected. So any ideas on alternative measures, again, please send them to me. Okay, let's move on to attestation. As Eric said, the attestation has to be done by the certifying official. That's the way it's written in the order. It's a corporate officer with supervisory and budgetary authority over network operations. Okay, there's lots of ways we could have the attestation done. One way is it could actually be done separately. We could have a separate letter from each company from the certifying official. We could have the system allow to attach a letter saying that they certify that this is accurate. Finally, we could actually have the certifying official have a login ID on the system, and they say, everything is great, I believe it, this is the way it is, everything is accurate in this particular report. So I'm not sure what's the best way, and if you have suggestions on what you would like for your company, please send them to me, because we'd like to make sure, again, that the process doesn't prevent you from certifying your 911 network in accordance to our rules. Okay, let's talk about rolling out the process. What we're hoping to do is allow testing of the system about 6 months before the initial certification is due. Right now, I believe it's going to be sometime either in the summer or September of next year is when the first initial certification is going to be due. So 6 months before that, we'd like to roll out the system and allow people to test it. And they can put in whatever they'd like. At that time, we may be able to even make some alterations on some of the alternative measures even. So the idea is to do some testing 6 months before the initial certification is due. We plan to have the formal certification system available about 3 months before the initial certification is due. We're hoping to have that so that if people want to put in some of the certification information piecemeal, they can do it. In other words, they don't have to put it all in at one time. Okay, so what are the next steps? Some of the next steps are we're actually planning some webinars for some of the small providers. We're actually going to develop the online platform. Although it says continue developing online platform, we haven't really started it yet. And that's David's fault, by the way. It's not my fault. Again, what we're hoping for in this certification process is we want to make it easy for you guys to provide the information that we need. We want to make sure that the information is secure. In other words, we don't want you to worry about somebody seeing the information that really should not have access to the information. And we also want to make sure that we set it up so that we do get a complete set of information and allow you to tell us what you're doing in the certification process in the easiest and the most correct way possible. I think that's it for me. Does anybody have any questions? I'm willing to answer any questions. But again, what I'm praying for is, please send me some alternative measures that you think you're going to be using in the various steps, and we'll hardwire those alternative measures into the system so that you can select them, and it'll make our job easier. It'll make your job easier. Any questions? Boy, I must be clear. Okay. Yes.
Mike Saperstein with Frontier, and I think picking up on Joe's question from earlier, I'm still a little unclear as to whether when we go through the web portal, we're doing one kind of mass certification, but say we've got 800 circuits that we have looked at and 500 have some kind of remediation. Would we then be uploading an Excel sheet detailing what the remediation was, in addition to checking on the initial certification what types of categories were selected? Am I understanding that right?
The answer is what you would do is you would check on the overall certification report. Mm-hmm. You would check the box, no, but alternative measures. Mm-hmm. And then for the ones in which, let's talk about the backup power ones.
Sure.
For the ones where you do some alternative measure for that particular central office, and there may be only 40 central offices for which you do something different. Right. Than in other words, for 1,000 of your central offices, everything is hunky dory. That you meet it. You don't have to list those separately. Just the 40 that you have an alternative measure. Okay. And we will try to hardwire in the Excel spreadsheet all the alternative measures, and then we'll also have an other category where you can explain, and then we'll also have a box that allows you to put in a remarks, where you think of something that we didn't think of, and there's no logical way of putting it in the information, and you would fill in the form. So you'd have one line for each of those 40 offices.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
If it helps on that note too, I'm just looking at the rule text on the way the rules describe the certification of alternative measures is with respect to each PSAP or with respect to each central office. So I think that's along the lines of what John's saying is that there would be an alternative measures report at that level for each one, where you could describe everything that might be going on for that PSAP or that central office. Do I have that right?
Yes. Again, our goal was to try to make you not have to on the things that where you've actually done everything that you and you actually meet it. We don't want you to have to list all those ones that you did everything that you. Okay, if that's it, I want to thank everybody for coming to our workshop. Please help me. So I'm not kidding. My email address is john.healy, john.healy, Healy, @fcc.gov. You can email me anytime, and we will try to use all the information that you send to us. And by the way, if you'd like to have a meeting with your company and the FCC about the process, just give me a call and we will have a conference call or a meeting.
What's your phone number, John?
My phone number is 202-418-2448. But one thing that I tell people, if you really want to reach me on my cell phone. It's 215-847-8094. Okay. Again, thank you.
Last call for any questions online. Anybody remote
sorry.
have any questions?
We'll be around for a while.
Okay, we'll be around. World record. Thank you for coming, everybody. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you clapped for him.